be relentless in demanding open systems. Be relentless in demanding permissionless systems. Do not accept closed source permission software as crypto. And we owe it on ourselves, or else we'll have the state regulate us. And the choices are us to make. Do we want our industry to be self-regulated, or do we want the state and police to come knocking on our doors? They will come, and they already are. I mean, look at Gary Gensler talking about crypto, and Senator Warren talking about crypto. They talk about SBFs of the world, but they don't talk about the good things. And that is what we owe to ourselves.
Welcome to the Edge Podcast. I'm DeFi Dad here with Nomadic from 4RC. Today's episode spotlights Akash, the world's first decentralized supercloud. Akash is a trailblazer in an exciting sector of Web3 known as DePIN. In this episode, we'll speak with Akash co-founder Greg Osuri about how the Akash network works, how they are growing this community-owned system to compete with giants such as AWS, and why the Akash network needs crypto. But before we do, just a quick word from our sponsors who make the Edge Podcast possible.
Introducing the MANTLE liquid staking protocol, MANTLE LSP, a permissionless, non-custodial ETH liquid staking protocol deployed on Ethereum L1 and governed by MANTLE. With MANTLE LSP, users can stake ETH to instantly receive METH, earn yield and accumulate rewards the longer you stake. METH is the value accumulating receipt token that will give you access to expanded yield opportunities. Stake and watch your yield grow with MANTLE LSP.
For most of us, our crypto journey started with MetaMask. And now with MetaMask Portfolio, we can do so much more. MetaMask Portfolio puts you in control. Use the dashboard to see all your assets and balances across your wallets in one place. The buy feature allows us to buy crypto assets effortlessly with fiat options such as PayPal or credit card. The swap feature allows us to swap any tokens anytime by finding a selection of available rates. The bridge feature allows us to bridge between networks including Ethereum, L1s, and L2s based on the best price and fastest delivery time. And with the stake feature, anyone in a few clicks can stake ETH and earn rewards. Do more in Web3 your way with a safe, simple, and convenient tool that's all in one place. Track and manage your Web3 everything at metamask.io/portfolio. Mike, before we get back to the show, can you explain what is liquid restaking?
Everybody at this point is familiar with liquid staking. It lets you take your staked ETH, mint a liquid staking token, and then use that token in DeFi. Well, the hottest thing in staking right now is restaking. It's the ability to reuse your staked ETH to provide Ethereum's trust layer to other services that want to benefit from it. Services like data availability layers, Oracle networks, other blockchains, and beyond. The benefit of restaking is that you get to earn additional staking rewards on top of your normal staking rewards. Well, currently, if you want to restake your ETH, your only option is to lock up your ETH. The reason that's a problem is because you can't use your restaked ETH in DeFi. We are launching ETH, the ETHER.FI liquid restaking token, because with liquid restaking, users get the benefit of staking rewards, restaking rewards, and they get to collect loyalty points for ETHER.FI and EigenLayer through this token. So it's the easiest way to get exposure to two up-and-coming early protocols, and on top of that, get all the benefits of staking and restaking.
To learn more about ETH liquid staking and liquid restaking, go to ETHER.FI.
It all started so simply with CryptoKitties and Maker on Ethereum, but quickly became complex with more applications and many chains. Today, everyone agrees UX issues are the biggest blocker standing in the way of crypto adoption. Introducing AVOCADO. Multi-chain UX redesigned from the ground up. The first wallet to abstract networks, accounts, and gas. One gas tank to pay transaction fees on all chains in USDC. And native access to INSTADAPP's powerful, custom DeFi strategies. AVOCADO, one wallet to rule all chains.
All right, let's introduce Greg Osuri, a co-founder and core contributor of Akash Network. He is also CEO of Overclock Labs. Greg, welcome to the Edge Podcast. How are you doing?
Doing fantastic. Thank you so much for having me here.
Yeah, it is a pleasure to have you on the podcast. You were one of the guests that we had on a wish list in 2023. And so, yeah, it's a privilege for us to, I think, talk to someone who's been a builder in the space for such a long time, in the crypto space specifically. Part of our conversation today is going to be a bit about why does Akash need crypto, or maybe why doesn't it need crypto in some aspects. It's a really open-ended, I think, thought-provoking question that's going to be a little bit difficult to answer. I don't want to linger too much today on your background. Just to kick off, most of our guests, I think, are like newer to the scene, and we're trying to spotlight these newer protocols. You have a fairly large following in the crypto space. But that said, in case someone is new to Akash and getting to know you, can you give us maybe like an abridged version of just some of the work that you've done over the years in crypto and on Akash?
Absolutely. So my background, being a programmer for all my life, I cannot remember a time I did not code. And last 15 years, been primarily focused on building developer tooling. Helped found a company called AngelHack, the largest hackathon accelerator in the world. It was so large that TechCrunch used to write about every hackathon we threw. Then helped launch several developer tooling. Firebase was launched at AngelHack, very popular cloud database now. Being an open source contributor for the longest time, I found love to with this new paradigm called Linux containers, or Kubernetes, if you have heard of this term. Early contributor to the ecosystem. We're talking about 2013 timeframe. I still have libraries that are actively used by Kubernetes, Terraform, and Docker, and these early, paradigm shifting technologies. And founded Overclock Labs, the company behind Akash Network, in 2015 to take Kubernetes to market. I know it sounds funny now that Kubernetes is used by 80% of the cloud. Back then, nobody heard of Kubernetes, so looks like we have a similar pattern here too with DeFi, with DePIN and whatnot. Founded Overclock, and to really the first product we had was an edge-optimized network, edge computing network, taking Kubernetes to the edge. That's when we discovered most compute at the edge is not used. The edge is essentially a data center. So that's when the idea for Akash Network really came into play in 2016. And we were, with the edge computing technology, we already were doing something peer-to-peer, because not to get too technical into why you need peer-to-peer for edge computing, you have something called a consistency problem with state with the edge, in the sense that all the edge nodes need to know about each other to have a reliable technology. If not into deadlocks. That's when we started experimenting with peer-to-peer tech. We put BitTorrent for state consistency. We had Merkle tree integrity checks. So we ended up building a blockchain without even realizing I'm building a blockchain. That's how we got into blockchain, 2016. Wrote a paper introducing the notion of a supercloud. The idea came from Cornell, really, in 2015, Supercloud, but it was not Cornell alone that was responsible to come up with the idea. It was an industry understanding that, hey, look, we have this thing called a cloud that's getting extremely prominent in all aspects of our software development. It's not hard to see how this hyper concentration of power can lead to inefficiencies. We call that the whole industry was talking about it, the academics were talking about it. That's when the idea of a supercloud came, where, hey, if you can reduce the cloud providers to just resource providers and move all the critical aspects, be it orchestration, be it fault tolerance, be it, observability, all the important stack, to a higher level where the users are in control, we can achieve cloud independence, right? That's the idea of the supercloud. And what better way to implement a supercloud than decentralized systems? Because decentralized systems can guarantee that, open source systems remain open, right? So that was inspiration for Akash, and being open source builders all our life. And me personally I consider myself one of the biggest benefactors of open source, having to learn how to code in India without without a computer and using books then that couldn't afford to pay licenses to Apple and whatnot. So I grew up in open source in the 90s. And I love open source, and that's one of the reasons we began Akash. And long story short, here we are in 2024. Akash finally is getting the attention I think it deserves, but it's been 10 years in them.
Greg, thanks for sharing that background with us. It feels like you've been building kind of in a sandbox, in a space that everybody's kind of converging on now. And you mentioned decentralization, and I was thinking kind of back to an event, I think it was like earlier mid-December, this Decentralized AI Summit. A colleague of mine, Keegan, I know you met him there, was at the event. And I'm just kind of curious, like, what was your takeaways from that event? It seems like it's getting more and more popular now, this notion of decentralized AI, and it's a space that you've been toiling away in for quite some time, it sounds like. So yeah, just maybe like high level thoughts of what you're seeing and where this movement's going, if it's like really taking hold.
Absolutely. So I think it's funny that decentralized AI, we wrote in our white paper published in 2017 about machine learning, right? On how Akash, the primary use case for Akash is machine learning. And it's been, 6 years, and now we're finally starting to see that machine learning and decentralization coming together. And it's fascinating to see the amount of projects that are working on the space. It's incredible. So we have different stages of projects. I mean, most of the projects there presented had some form of a working demo or a prototype. It's just not empty presentations that you typically see at the conferences you go for crypto conferences, right? That's refreshing, and a lot of that is because there are real builders that are coming into the space, both being deep in decentralization arena and also deep in AI, right? News research, and these folks are deep AI researchers actually doing decent, right? I've sensed a great degree of purity in approach for decentralized AI space, but also I've sensed a few opportunistic, endeavors that are coming, like with everything we see, right? So I feel like if I have to quantify it, maybe like 90% of the projects that were there were legit, like were incredible with true values, and I would say 10% are always opportunistic, right? That's very refreshing for crypto. I mean, usually like 10% is usually the opposite. You just see 10% legit projects and 90% junk. So big takeaway for me is yes, this space is early, and this space needs a lot of support. And with support, this space will take off. Considering the quality of people that are involved are incredibly high. It was also amazing to see Eric Voorhees there talking about permissionless AI, because Eric, is very well respected. And in fact, Morpheus is Eric's new project, and they're using Akash now. It's really good to see, folks like Eric and protocols like Akash, Morpheus embracing a permissionless layer for computing, right? So a lot of incredible takeaways. I think it was one of my best ROIs in terms of time I spent, on a Saturday for sure. And I highly recommend anyone to attend the next one. I think they're going to have one very soon. But yeah, decentralized AI is here to stay. It's taking off. All aspects, right? Be it resources, be it DePIN, be it verification, be it so many different aspects of decentralized AI are coming together.
Yeah, if you want to know where the puck is going, it's always good to follow Eric Voorhees and what he's thinking about. So that's definitely some signal to know that he's dedicating that much time to Morpheus. Funny enough, if folks listen to this in the future, we should be releasing a podcast shortly after this with one of the contributors on Morpheus. So small world. We're starting to connect the dots here ourselves. Greg, going back then to Akash, can we talk a little bit about like where's Akash in its like long-term roadmap? Like maybe you can help us to gauge like what are some of the more like recent milestones and then probably more broadly, like where are we going in the next year?
So broadly speaking, I would classify Akash as two different phases, right? The master plan has two phases. The first phase is pre-parity and post-parity. So pre-parity is really about, parity is about achieving similar levels of capabilities as a traditional cloud. Akash is not there yet, right? So traditional clouds being Amazon, Google's, and Microsoft's have been around for a very, very, very long time. And over the years, they've built moats that are incredibly strong, and they have enormous amounts of capabilities and also scale. So Akash is not there yet, but the goal is absolutely to get there as quick as possible, right? So in order for us to achieve parity, we need capabilities that Amazon has that are very critical, be it observability, be it automation, a whole lot of things. I mean, the roadmap is there on the website. But every new capability we introduce, we are hyper-focused on the market that this capability will serve and the unique value proposition this capability will bring where the incumbent does not. So the recent capability we brought to market was GPUs, right? So GPUs, yes, GPUs are, even though the incumbents have the GPU capability, they just didn't have supply. You cannot go and get on-demand A100 or H100 on Amazon because they just don't have it, right? And they're sold out and they can't get more, and the economies of scale are breaking down here. All the things we know about Harvard Business School theses are all breaking down here, right? So in a scenario like that, Akash offers, you can get A100s on Akash today. Right now, today, this morning, I was able to get an A100 for $200 an hour. Oh, sorry, a month. And Akash is the only place that, I mean, the $200 probably not very common. I mean, this typically around $1,000, but that's, Akash is open market. Somebody wants to sell a chip for $200 to sell a chip for $200, right? So that unique capability, and similar before GPUs, our big launch was just being able to do non-custodial hosting. Now, non-custodial hosting is not available on Amazon, right? So people that come to Akash for that capability, right? So now you have non-custodial GPU capability. So that there are two aspects of this, right? So the GPUs are very attractive for machine learning companies, and non-custodial aspect is very attractive for decentralized companies, and especially for decentralized AI companies or protocols, right? Like Morpheus, for example. So every time we launch, we're very, very, very cognizant about the value proposition and how we differentiate ourselves from TradFi. So we believe we'll achieve parity in the next 2 years. And after that, the phase we like to call is really innovation beyond imagination. So what would a world look like where you can have 1,000 regions offering general purpose compute at 50 millisecond network latency for 98th percentile of active internet population? We have not seen something like that. And what would it look like when we can essentially repurpose compute from homes, right? So we're talking about powerful GPUs, be it in your gaming console, to your cars, to every connected device has some degree of AI capability, and it will have AI capability in the future. And how does a connected globe that comprises of these low-power devices look? So I think, and along with a very healthy cloud capability, that's first and most important thing. Without that, you don't have demand. So that's how we look at Akash 5 years down the line, and being decentralized gives Akash a unique angle that traditional companies doesn't, which is permanence. Like, permanency is not possible with the corporation, only possible with a protocol, right? So and permanency brings a lot of power when it comes to adoption, right? So with permanency, you get time that you don't get with traditional corporations, right? So to put permanency and scale is what we're looking at Akash at success.
Greg, there was a lot of good stuff in there. You used a term, and I don't know if this is a common term, but I love it. Innovation beyond imagination. That is like the stuff that excites me personally. It's like, where could this stuff go? Like, I love when people kind of connect dots that I haven't even thought of or thought possible. But yeah, super exciting. We could probably even riff on that a bit more later in the pod. So I was in your community Discords, and you posted some questions on Twitter, like what sort of things do your community want to talk about? So we wanted to add in some community questions to this pod, and one of the big ones that kind of kept coming up for us was, what are like the current fundamental scaling factors that are limiting adoption for Akash right now? And then if you want to kind of dive into also, I guess, how you're planning on attacking that as well, that'd be great.
Yeah, so there are two challenges, broadly speaking, for Akash adoption to really go berserk, right? Really go hyperscale. First is credibility, right? So credibility, infrastructure is about climbing the credibility ladder, right? So for a traditional company to look at a crypto protocol as a credible solution to their problem is very hard. And that gets solved by time or by intelligent design, right? And a big challenge really is the bad actors that have not been contributing to better credibility of crypto all along, right? So it's so, like, every time I feel like we made good progress, there's always some impediment to the progress, usually driven by greed and carelessness. And that is a big challenge to solve, because for us, Akash to go and give a talk at a traditional, say, KubeCon or some open source conference, it's very challenging because they don't take us seriously. Even though we have scale, we have users, we have revenues, we have all the good stuff that you normally consider to be a good venture, right? And the credibility, again, we have several no-coiners using Akash, which I take a lot of pride in, and a lot of people that hate crypto doing machine learning, come use Akash because they see a $500 A100. Because for them, it's all about the A100. They don't care about crypto or not, right? And they have to go use Akash because, well, Akash doesn't exist without crypto. So I take a lot of pride in converting the no-coiners to using coin, and like throw out all your biases aside and like look at what Akash can offer and just look deeper, right? And also we have Department of Defense, US DoD, experimenting with Akash. We saw a Marine Corps officer go on record, it's somewhere on the internet, talk about how the US DoD loves AKT because of its privacy, because of security, because of not AKT, Akash Network, because of a lot of the aspects. And DoD cannot use Amazon or external cloud. They have to use their own cloud. So they are implementing Akash internally to consolidate and federate their supply, right? So that adds to the credibility. That makes it a little more easier. And a lot of times from a provider standpoint, when we go to large companies, they're like, oh, security and all this hypothetical like concerns. I'm like, okay, it's good for the military. It's probably good for you, right? Like, so credibility is getting solved. And the second big challenge is really behavior. So crypto systems, unfortunately, are not as smooth as your traditional, client server applications, right? From an experience standpoint, it's slow. It takes an intelligent asynchronous design to solve. Uniswap did a phenomenal job introducing this notion of asynchronous web system. Really embracing the asynchronous of crypto and having a smooth interface. And Akash console is also another, CloudMouse console is another great example on how you can use a non-custodial system. But securing the keys is challenging. Even for like a busy human being, right? It doesn't have to be crypto, but if you tell me how to carry your ledgers everywhere you go, and if you have to secure your keys, if you lose your keys, you lose your access to your resources, and convincing somebody in an enterprise to use their credit card to purchase crypto has been one of the biggest challenges, because a lot of times we talk to developers that want GPUs, right? So you approach them and be like, hey, this is my credit card. Just use my credit card and give me what I want. They're authorized from their finance teams, but the moment you say you have to put your credit card in Kraken, and buy some crypto, they need levels of approval that takes forever. It's so, how will that get solved? I don't know. I think, well, there are two ways to solve that, right? Like, one way is to give a credit card-based capability, right? From a product standpoint, which we are doing. AkashML is one solution that we're working on. Another one is to integrate into bigger systems that have the capability that are serving to this application, the user base. And we're making some announcements this month. You'll see in the next few weeks, we will be one of the hottest and the fastest growing machine learning platform. These guys are on the front page of Hacker News. Hacker News is a very popular traditional like Web2 dev, news syndication website. These are very popular machine learning folks. I mean, from Meta and whatnot. They love the fact that you can get A100s on Akash and you can get A100s anywhere. So for them, the value prop is very direct. So they're they're doing a custodial interface or a hosted interface on top of Akash, right? I think that'll solve some of these challenges people will find to use Akash, right? So these two challenges will get solved over time. And the third aspect, I guess, like the whole ecosystem that we need to build around the open source nature, right? The question is like, who do you call when something goes wrong, right? So when you have integrations with these, clients that are custodial, you have an answer. But to use Akash directly, there is no support infrastructure, professional support infrastructure that you get with an Amazon or any open source software. And me coming from a world of Kubernetes, managed Kubernetes that we introduced with Overclock, we clearly understand how to sell enterprise software. And Overclock again is coming up with the new models to support this support infrastructure essentially. But yeah, there's a lot of enterprise like lack of user engagement challenges. Engagement framework, big challenging part, right? Or the engagement framework that has Web3 native, which is very challenging.
I wonder if you'll see an ecosystem of like partners pop up then in the coming years, because I mean, what you're describing as like there's like a gap in terms of like enterprise level customer support, like that's an opportunity for someone else. I'm familiar with the fact that like there are so many developers that you're serving out there who like they don't want to mess around with all of the friction that I've learned is there with like the likes of AWS. Like they can get up and going with Akash, I would imagine much faster. But then to the point of going back to your point about scaling, like, we can't just depend on all those like smaller independent folks. Like I'm sure, like, as you pointed out, there's larger customers out there, and it's just a reality. Like I used to work in Silicon Valley, and yeah, there's no way in hell that someone would have approved for me and the company I was in to, go buy crypto tokens and then use those to pay. They just would have looked at me blankly and said, can't you just find something so you can put the credit card through? Something you mentioned there about AkashML, is there anything else you can share about that? Like in case folks are totally blind to that, it's something that you've alluded to more recently through tweets and the podcast. And then maybe you can expand upon that as to like, why does Akash even need crypto then? Like, why do you continue to double down on this?
Absolutely. So AkashML is our suite of services that help Akash get adoption from a tenant standpoint, in the sense that more often than not, people ask us for credit card capability. People come to us and be like, look, I really want the A100s. Can I just pay you using credit card? And we say no. And we feel terrible, right? And we want to say yes. So AkashML lets you use Akash for machine learning only, not for general purpose. Machine learning only, a credit card to pay for this A100s. AkashML also does provider selection, because Akash being a Wild West, anybody can supply, compute, and you get a mix, right? Sometimes you get incredible services like Foundry. Foundry is a DCG company that's providing Akash, and we have other major ML companies now doing that have essentially a fleet of A100s because they upgraded H100s are sitting idle. companies like that are normal, but you have, a company in Swiss, you have 60 different providers on Akash that you get a bunch of mix, right? You have Joe's data center sitting somewhere. There's literally a data center called Joe's data center. So, so provider selection, provider sort of like smoothing that out, making sure the user needs to change their behavior the least to use Akash is what AkashML is offering. It goes one step beyond. It actually optimizes your workflows, right? So just not use Akash with a credit card, but also like, okay, look at how does your machine learning work? What are you doing? Inference? Are you doing training? Are you doing fine tuning? What does that look like? What does the stack look like? There are several ways to do like say clustering, right? So you can use ray clusters, you can do traditional clusters, you can do for inference is very different. How you do clustering versus fine tuning is very different, right? So all these aspects of decisions someone has to make, AkashML provides a opinionated framework that removes friction for adoption, right? And Akash remains as a simple protocol. It has to remain simple. The simplicity in design is so critical for security and so critical for functionality of the protocol. The moment you start adding opinions on top of the protocol, you start like saturating the protocol, right? That's why TCP/IP is very simple. That's why Bitcoin is very simple, because most successful protocols are very, very simple. I mean, Akash is complex enough in what it does. Adding more complexity to the protocol is just going to make the protocol very inefficient, right? And so that comes to why crypto. Why does Akash need to be crypto? Can it be non-crypto? Like a lot of folks, it's a very good question, right? So a lot of folks actually, funny enough, they start off with crypto because of XYZ reasons, God knows what. And the moment they raise money, they go non-crypto immediate. Like Together Compute is a classic example. I mean, great AI company, they raised a lot of money and got a lot of press based on the fact they're going to tap into unused capacity using crypto. The moment they raise money, they pivot to a centralized model because it's just easier. Centralized models are just so fast. You can have emails, you can have credit cards, you can have all the things that are talked about in terms of friction. You don't have that with your traditional company. So why not? The reason is really going back to what are we doing with Akash in the first place? Like, are we building another hosting company like Amazon, Google, Microsoft? Or are we trying to disrupt that hosted model, right? Are we trying to change the way things are done, right? Or not even change? Are we trying to go back to the way things were when internet was created, which is decent? Being an open source developer, it was very, very important for me to make sure development and systems remain open, because traditionally speaking, closed systems always came before open systems, but closed systems always had limitations that limit adoption. And the moment they became open, the adoption just went exponential. Internet is a prime example. Like internet, TCP/IP was not the first standard for the internet, right? For exchanging packets, we had so many different standards. I mean, remember Novel Netware, there was not TCP/IP, and we had been in the space for long enough to really understand there's so many different protocols. They're all centralized and closed to a certain degree. The moment TCP/IP came, it changed the game completely, right? It changed the way you communicate between two peers, right? And web came about. The World Wide Web standard, the open standards for the web, came and defined what a hypertext could be transitioned. And that web was not the first open standard, right? We had several other closed standards, right? I remember AOL. AOL was the first browser, but it didn't take off anywhere because there is a human being, a single or multiple human beings that are making decisions on behalf of millions, if not billions, that are not going to get these decisions right all the time. They're going to mess up. That's why you need open systems where participation is open by its users, right? It's very, very important to have an open system for achieving any level of scalability or achieving any level of accountability. So public utility, I am a public utility maxi, right? So public utilities need to be public and need to be maintained by a public. If it's a private utility, it doesn't have to be a public, right? If it's something that you're building for a few customers and few users that are very, very happy with the kind of service they're providing, it's great to be private. It's great to be closed. There's nothing wrong with being closed, but if you're building something that needs to achieve a global scale and we consider to be a public utility, it has to be open. There's no other way. Every other structure we tried before has shown its fragility, right? OpenAI, for example, like OpenAI is building GPT model, right? Like ChatGPT, right? Like what happened recently? I mean, there was a board takeover. 5 people that nobody heard of before were able to control the most powerful AI in the world. Think about the implications of that. Why? Because the corporate structure allows you to do so, right? Regardless what the intentions are, the fact that if 5 unknown individuals that took over the most powerful AI in the world for however long, imagine if they had access to AGI. Imagine what that would look like, right? There is inherent fragility in these old systems that need to be changed, and the only way to do so is through open source. Closed systems can go fast, open systems can go far, as is very, very important, right? So we want infrastructure to be open, and that's why we started Akash Network. And now you look at the traditional open source models, why you can be open source and you can be closed, right? You don't have to be decentralized, but that never really worked. It only worked for Red Hat. Red Hat was the only company that could figure out how to monetize on open source really well. Every other company that came after Red Hat that has some degree of success with open source has been commercial open source. Commercial open source software, in the sense, is you have a community edition that's free and available to your community, but the more powerful versions of the software are closed behind. So I don't consider commercial open source as a real open source, because you're not giving the real value out. You're giving a test. It's a marketing technique more than a real open source software, because the community edition is by far significantly lower powered than your actual corporate edition you're just selling for profit, right? So I looked at open core. Open core was not the solution, right? So what and token as open source software allows a sustainability model to open source that the world has never seen. So why? Because it removes the maintainability of a network away from a single corporation to the common. Common here being a set of validators, a set of miners, or whoever maintains the state, right? And for the first time, we can have an open write database. Never before that was possible before crypto came. Like, if you were to deploy a challenge, like I said before, we were doing edge computing. A challenge with edge computing systems are edges can be anywhere. You can have a data center literally sitting in my house, and that could be considered as an edge. You don't necessarily have control over the data center, and you have to assume a minimal trust environment when you deploy an edge. Challenge with minimal trust environment is bootstrapping credentials. How do you bootstrap? How do you give a password and a username to a remote edge where you have no trust? It's a very difficult problem to solve, and that's where crypto came incredibly well. Blockchains allow you to write without a permission. That's ideal for an edge computing system, right? So to have true scalability without trust, blockchain is the only piece of technology that I can think of, top of my head, that allows for this trust minimized node membership of a network, right? So, and you add the sustainability aspect on top of it, it gives you permanency, right? Permanency is a feature the software doesn't really embrace anymore, because we used to have permanency back in the day when we sent meant to the moon, right? When you wrote the systems, these systems never failed. They were incredibly resilient. And I've seen mainframes that are still in use today. The way you write software once and you have this permanent sort of like to the software, but with this whole iteration, this whole Web 2, like iterative like deployment, we lost the sense of permanency to software, right? You create a piece of software, it's gone maybe like 2 years later. With crypto, you don't have it. You have the permanency. You have this property of resiliency where the creator or the company or the individual that created the software can go away and the software still is alive. Look at Bitcoin, right? It's not going to die. So crypto is an incredibly new paradigm, so powerful in what it can offer that the world has yet to embrace, because these core values often get oversaturated because of the greed that we have that comes on top of it, right? And bad actors just hide these values. So it's our opportunity now to really ask ourselves, like, why are we doing this? Why is DePIN needs to be D? Why is there a D in DePIN, right? Like, why is it has to be decentralized? It's faster if it's not decentralized, right? Like, but unless your application is open source, unless your application is open access without permission, censorship resistance, and the peer-to-peer, there's no reason to be deep. You can do what Together Compute does, right? Together, the GPU network, they're moving very fast. They raised $100 million from, amazing investors. They're doing really well with GPU hosting, right? They're just buying up GPUs here and there. I mean, that's also a good way to go, but you don't have to do DePIN to do this GPU.
Yeah, so for all the years you spent in Silicon Valley, like when I think of transformational companies that are like enormous corporations now, like I'll use Microsoft as like one example. Like, do you have any hope that like the Satya Nadellas of the world will like see the light on this? Because what you just shared is like, I could just put that on repeat and wake up every day and listen to that. It really embodies, I think, the values, like the mission behind crypto that probably drew in a lot of us. And I've always struggled with like, why do these big guys like not see it, or like, why has it taken so long? And I could just state the obvious that like the incentives are not aligned, that, if you're a corporation operating in the US has made it near impossible to be, an early adopter of crypto. They've actually made it increasingly more difficult.
So I talked to several leaders. Recently, I was talking to the co-founder of Red Hat, and so Red Hat is an incredible example, right? Because I think Red Hat has really innovated in a business model that no one ever came close to in terms of providing support for Linux, right? So Linux before Red Hat was very different, was very cyberpunk. Linux after Red Hat was very enterprise, right? So Red Hat, when they learned about Akash, they were so excited. I'm not talking about Red Hat as a company. I'm talking about this individual who's the founder, one of the founders, that they could really see a new paradigm of business models being developed here, right? I think the term we came out was tokenized open source software, right? So people are starting to see that, hey, there is one challenge right now is the corporate model is incentivized to be a monopoly. Whereas crypto models, the commons model, is incentivized to be a marketplace, which is anti-monopoly. So the corporation is at odds with the common. And that's the challenge, right? Because corporations always at the odds of the market, right? The market, an open market, the goal is to have perfect competition, we call it, right? The economists. A perfect competition is where all the goods and services are priced the same, right? And the consumer has a lot of choices to choose. Whereas the corporation is incentivized to be a monopoly because that's their biggest driver. So incentive misalignment is a big challenge for corporate CEOs to take crypto seriously. So unless there is some incentive that's going to increase their shareholder value, right? So I think that a lot of them privately love Akash or decentralization in general, but publicly nobody wants to take the position. And a lot of them are taking AI as a position because AI has significantly a lot more value capture for a corporation than what blockchains could do, because blockchains are inherently giving away value, right? So will they embrace crypto? It's hard to say, because conversations that I've been having with Googles of the world or Microsoft of the world, like senior vice president level conversations, they all love crypto, right? Some of them, one company I don't want to name, senior vice president, very high up in the chain. He told me personally that they tried something like Akash to solve their AI problem, to source GPUs from crypto miners. So we're not the only ones who are thinking about these problems. And big corporations have thought about these. They just couldn't pull the plug because of crypto, right? Because of regulatory uncertainty, because of just the degeneracy that we have, and kind of in a weird way, the money aspect of crypto kind of makes it very unattractive to larger corporations, even though there's a lot of money to be made. So my prediction is, with the Bitcoin ETF, you're going to see more institutional adoption. What that means is more focus on fundamentals more than speculation in terms of valuing an asset. I think there are essentially two ways the world could go post-ETF. One way is like Bitcoin goes crazy and we're going to have a short-term, like, obvious expansion on the market. But I think that'll lead to more serious players looking at more fundamentals, and they're looking at, well, where's the revenue, where's the money going here and there, right? So that may normalize valuations of a lot of the crypto networks, right? So because you now have, if you have a capability to go long, you'll also have a capability to go short, right? So the institutions and hedge funds will potentially look at business and be like, okay, we're going to short some, right? Like, so, but that is actually healthy in a way, because, it normalizes valuations, it normalizes the speculation, it evens out the volatility a little better, reduces the volatility a little better, so that could actually be more interesting for large corporations to be more interested. So as crypto goes mainstream, I mean, today I just saw Fidelity was talking about Akash, right? Like, so like we're having like the TradFi or the TradFi funds talking about Akash. When you see like that level of conversations, you're almost certain to see a normalized valuations in the future, and we have X amount of time to reach there in terms of adoption to match a valuation, because I think we'll be in trouble otherwise.
Yeah, I can't help but think that a Bitcoin ETF approval is just going to do so much for legitimacy. I think it's going to help the credibility issue that you mentioned before. Like, I think people will naturally look at, okay, what's next? What other things can these networks be used for, and what are people already using them for? But something else you were kind of talking about is incentives, and there's a whole aspect of how blockchains work that are incentivized by tokens. And this kind of segues into another community question that I saw people asking a lot in your Discord. Is you tweeted out something, I think it was like early December, that you made this critical decision not to incentivize the supply side of Akash too early before you started seeing, I guess, good examples of product market fit. But it sounds like now you want to turn on those incentives. And I know your Discord community is very curious how you're going to go about that. So I don't know how much detail you can get into that, but we'd love to hear you speak to it a bit.
Funny enough, in 2019, I wrote a blog post calling an essay that said bootstrapping a free market by borrowing from the future. So this blog post talked about incentives, to essentially incentives in the sense your token incentives. You're borrowing the value because the value of your network is probably future value, right? And then you're borrowing from the future value to incentivize current or bootstrap your current needs. And I've changed my position since writing the blog post after studying different protocols that have kind of went in bootstrap networks, right? A lot of my understanding came from looking at existing networks that achieve massive scale in terms of supply, but unable to come anywhere close to achieving that from a demand standpoint. And running out of these token incentives, you may have them run for like a few years, but then they're not limitless, right? So the moment you have limitless inflation, then you have essentially limitless sell pressure, which essentially will kill your network, especially if you're a proof of stake network. So there's limited amount of incentives that can be deployed, and when you deploy matters a lot. If you do pre-demand, we know crypto is incredible for attracting supply. We're not, like if you look at TVLs on chain for DeFi, incentivize your way all the way to attract supply, which is like liquidity in this case, right? Or like literally, I guess liquidity. But are crypto incentives good to actually incentivize demand? They're terrible. That's why you see Uniswap without any incentives, they have demand without incentives to boost up supply, and they're very successful. So demand almost in most cases should not matter on incentives for supply. It should come before supply is incentivized organically. And or we should work hard towards achieving organic demand. And that was a critical decision we as a community in Akash made. We've been talking about for a very, very long time, all the way from the time we launched the chain in 2000 to 2021 to 2022. And we were, talking very loudly about GPUs, because Akash being general purpose is very heterogeneous in terms of the supply you get. You can get all kinds of unused supply. Unused supply is very variable, right? There's no like set configuration that's unused across the board. It's very, very heterogeneous. But incentives cannot be heterogeneous. It has to be homogeneous. So you have to identify a cohort in your demand side to create incentives for that particular cohort, right? So we need to look at what kind of demand we're getting. And turns out for machine learning with AI, there are only a few kinds of chips: H100s, A100s, L40s, A6000s, whatnot, right? So there is a finite set of configurations that we need to incentivize for, that gives a degree of homogeneity that makes distribution much more effective. And the second point is, we can also measure much more easily. So today, A100s on Akash have upwards of 90% utilization. It's easy to measure, right? Across the board, GPUs are about 50% roughly, but this is cumulative, right? Which is not very accurate, because the most demand is for A100s and H100s, right? So now all we need to do is incentivize H100s and A100s. So the way we're going to do that is very similar to liquidity mining that you used to either in most protocols. Osmosis, for example, and Osmosis provisioning works by creating a pool with characteristics for that pool in terms of liquidity characteristics. And you can provide the token, be it 1 or 2 or 3 pairs, whatever you need to provide. Similarly, Akash will have pools. A pool 1 could be A100 with NVMe storage, with PCI card, with X amount of memory, X amount of bandwidth, and certain characteristics of a provider that are preset, and a set of tokens get distributed to this pool, and based on the participants, it gets distributed further, right? So, for example, in the early days, when there are few participants, they're going to get significantly outsized rewards, which is fine because it's very, very, very attractive. So in the early days, say you're providing A100 and the market rate for A100 is about, let's say, hypothetically $1.50 an hour, you may be getting paid $10. That's fine, right? That's very attractive. But the idea is that'll attract more providers because the incentives are outsized, that eventually at scale, it'll even out. So initially, you may find providers from the cloud, right? People would arbitrage the hell out of it. No, why wouldn't you, right? Like, if you're able to get a cloud lucky. If you're lucky, you'll be able to get a cloud server. But there are people that are sitting on cloud GPUs and that do not want to give them up because they have their needs. But because if they give them up, they won't be able to get the cloud GPU. So the people like that, in the initial phase of our token reward distribution, is going to be incredible because for them it's a way out. But rewards will thin out at some point where only if you own the hardware, you'll get the economic benefit. If you're arbitraging, you may not. So the idea is, as at scale, the incentives become less and less attractive, but attracting enough for people that own hardware to be able to provide supply. At currently 50% utilization, which is very, very healthy, I think providers are very happy, especially 90% utilization at A100 levels. So providers should be very, very, providers are content with A100s, right? So we anticipate if that continues, post incentives will have the capacity like the way we have right now, but at significantly larger scale. So that's how we're looking at rolling out. Currently, we're going to do a $5 million pilot in this month. And after that, we have about $400+ million unminted on-chain incentives that are reserved for behavior incentives.
Wow, that is quite the war chest you have. This idea of liquidity mining pools for GPUs kind of blows my mind too. That's just kind of a crazy concept. And I'm kind of just curious to, like, where do these incentives come from? Or is that going to be rewarded in the AKT token? Is this inflationary yield? Is this going to cause sell pressure? Is the community happy about this? Or perhaps are there other areas where value accrual is being used to incentivize these pools in some ways? And then, Greg, I know that's kind of like a long-winded question, but maybe just remind users, we haven't talked about the token specifically and how it's utilized within the protocol, but maybe just remind us how it works, what its utility is. And also, like, I'd be curious if there's been any community, proposals to change anything in it.
Let's start off with token utility, right? So Akash is a layer one. It's built with Cosmos SDK, so it is its own blockchain. It is secured by 100 active validators, about 200+ validators right now on Akash. And every token has one vote, essentially, in the blockchain, right? So without the token, Akash blockchain does not work. And the incentive to secure the Akash blockchain comes from tokens that are emitted every block, right? Akash has a fixed supply. The token stands at around 389 million, my bad, as proposed by a white paper from several years, and that fixed supply does not change. We started off with 100 million tokens when we launched. Now we have minted around 200 million tokens, close to. So we still have 158, suppose, million tokens that are not minted. And if you look at a white paper from economics, we said we're going to incentivize providers. The mechanics of the incentivization will be detailed out as we ship the product and we learn from our behavior for users. But this is not a new idea. It's been around for a very long time. And people that hold Akash from 2000, 3 years on, they understand these incentives are there. In terms of sell pressure, not much, because we have buy pressure for tokens. So because of utilization, which is fairly high, people are buying AKT to use on the network that'll offset the sell pressure that comes from providers selling AKT. And a lot of the providers are actually taking a much longer bet, and a lot of them, we notice, are staking their tokens because there's an attractive reward, about 13%, I believe, right now, of APR for staking. And if you compound that, it's significantly higher. So our providers, like Foundry Digital, is a phenomenal company owned by DCG, and they are, for them, Akash is, participating in the ecosystem and earning Akash tokens is a much better way to accrue Akash. And if you think about, if you are AI, you probably are very bullish on GPUs and shortage of GPUs. So easy for a provider to see the value in the future. So we have the additional sort of keep Akash in the Akash ecosystem itself. So that offsets some of the sell pressure, right? In terms of token incentives release, we're not going crazy. So we're doing a pilot for 90 days, about $5 million with current liquidity. I think we have the markets can easily observe that sell pressure. And it's also a very controlled pilot. So the goal of the control pilot is to understand. So we have certain theses in terms of how people use, but again, we need checks and balances ourselves. So we are not going to have a runaway, like crazy, go nuts kind of thing. Initially, it's going to be managed for the first 90 days at least. And after that, we'll have more on-chain permissionless sort of like incentives. But how we offset depends on how we design, or the final design of the on-chain incentives depends on the outcome of the pilot. So we're going to reserve the actual details till we complete this. And the token, obviously, I touched on the utility side of things a little bit, but it's a central governance token, right? There are about 280 proposals on Akash. There's a proposal every week now at this point, right? Every aspect of Akash is public. If you go to Akash GitHub, you'll see a repo called Community. Every aspect. There are about 480 contributors to Akash Network GitHub. 19 of them work for Overclock Labs that created Akash. 90% of contributors for Akash come from outside the company, and it's built by the open. Every aspect of Akash is open. It's managed by the self-organizing groups called special interest groups and steering committees and working groups and whatnot. It's a very complex, a very fascinating structure if you want to see how open governance works. And you can see the SIGs that we regularly, and there is a SIG for every aspect of the chain. There's a SIG for GPU. So in case you want any capability that you want to see, you can come and make a proposal in the SIG itself. And we have several people that make proposals to improve Akash, right, every day. And some of these proposals go up the chain to the steering committee. The steering committee writes the recommendation. It's not approval, it's a recommendation mechanism. And it goes on chain for vote, right? So, and the community votes on every proposal. So there's no opacity of any degree, and completely done in the open. And the best part is all the product meetings are done in the open and published on Arweave, where you can actually go and permanently store, right? And it's all summarized. It's all published again on GitHub. So if you miss a meeting, you can just go read the summary and get caught up. So there's no sort of like, the Akash community is so incredible at sharing every aspect of Akash within this GitHub. So you should see the discourse. They're very, very active, right? We see all aspects of Akash. So we take a lot of pride in this open community, and AKT token is a central incentive mechanism, right? So there are times where there are bounties that are paid out in AKT. If you have a spec, more often than not, the spec actually goes for public to build instead of Overclock building it. Overclock builds certain features, but a lot of features today are built by public. CloudMost is built by public. Praetor is built by public. All these are different tools for Akash, right? The clients. All these are open source tools, so which I take a lot of pride in, right? So when you have an open source tool that's public utility, well, you need some incentive, right? That's not rooted in a business model. So AKT provides the firepower to the community to come, together, right? And AKT provides liquidity for providers to be able to liquidate their rewards and actually provide compute. So without that, there is no cycle, right? There is no, providing compute itself. And it's fixed supply. So, the incentives will run out at some point. And when they do, the hope is we will, with the current utilization, we'll be able to grow organically beyond that.
Greg, this is a great place for us to, I think, close out the conversation then. So just first off, thank you so much for being so generous with your time today. I want to remind our listeners that they should learn more about Akash at akash.network. They can follow the mothership account on Twitter. It's AkashNet_. They should follow Greg on Twitter. It's just his first and last name, Greg Osuri. And then, Greg, I'd leave it up to you for a final word on maybe what's the next biggest milestone or step we can look forward to this year for Akash, or any other sort of alpha. You've already shared so much, but anything else you're willing to share before we go?
Crypto is incentive on steroids, right? So that's one key property of crypto that no other industry can give. And what can we do with the incentives in a supply-constrained market, I think is going to be fascinating, right? Has never been done before for GPUs. I mean, we saw that with other commodities, but GPUs is the first time in doing it. I've had several large machine learning companies, I don't want to name who they are, approach to essentially put their entire A100 fleet in Akash. These are thousands of A100s, right? Because they usually, machine learning companies, they if you're been around for a while, you probably have a lot of A100s that you bought 3-4 years ago, and now you upgraded to H100 fleet. Now you have all A100s, you don't know what to do with. There's also tax advantage of keeping the A100s and writing off depreciation versus actually selling, because it's not good for taxes, right? So Akash is going to incentivize that sort of like supply, and supply is everywhere. People are surprised as to how much supply there is. It's just not available to the market. So with the right incentives, we can unlock the supply. And again, Akash is also, a good thing about Akash is there's an article on Semaphore. Semaphore is a very popular, mainstream, publication. It's a spin-off from Bloomberg. They don't write good things about crypto. The last thing they wrote about crypto was SBF, right? and do quants of the world. For the first time, we're seeing a positive article about crypto in a long, long, long time. And that article is about blockchain saving AI. And that's the narrative that we want. That's the press we want. That's the kind of message we want to spread. In Akash's recent press, there was zero coverage in crypto, but we had Washington Post, we had Semaphores, we had all this traditional like mainstream media talking about this innovative way to solve GPU problem. And Semaphore actually went and interviewed our users and our providers. There's a very, very interesting article, and they talk about all these users talk about how they couldn't find compute on Amazon, but they could find compute on Akash, right? So I think for the first time, we have something so critical that Amazon's of the world doesn't. And we have an incredible shot to get this right. And what I'm also concerned is there are a lot of charlatans and a lot of like opportunistic folks that are coming now. I don't even know how many GPU clouds that are coming up, right? So the moment I see over usage of buzzwords in a website, that is a red flag for me, because that is like, instead of talking about the core of the problem and what you're trying to offer as a value prop, the moment you start dropping buzzwords, you're going after the wrong audience. And that's concerning to me. So a lot of these flags, closed source software, buzzwordy, that are here because they see the money, never heard of these folks before, they show up, oversized valuations. We got to work very hard to avoid the same mistakes that we made last time. We let that happen. We let SPF happen. We let Doquans happen. That's on us. It's not on them, right? And I'm afraid that this wave is also going to bring a new set of entrepreneurs that are looking for opportunities that are going to make our job much more difficult in getting the credibility, right? For years, we had press blackout on positivity for crypto. For the first time, we're seeing that narrative change, and I'd like to keep it that way. Because remember, credibility is a huge problem in this space. So final word is be relentless in demanding open systems. Be relentless in demanding permissionless systems. Do not accept closed source permission software as crypto. And we owe it on ourselves, or else we'll have the state regulators. And the choices are us to make. Do we want our industry to be self-regulated, or do we want the state and police to come knocking on our doors? They will come, and they already are. I mean, look at Gary Gensler talking about crypto, and Senator Warren talking about crypto. They talk about SBFs of the world, but they don't talk about the good things. And that is what we owe to ourselves. So that's how I want to close out with.
Hell yeah. Honestly, that's probably where I close it, guys. Oh man, I'm going to hit stop right there. Thanks everyone for tuning in. If you're a talented founder or developer, please consider reaching out to our team at fourthrevolution.capital. And for future episodes of the Edge podcast, please check out our link tree at edge_pod.